Catus, Maximus here. This is just a quick video about the Harbor Freight Pittsburgh, or I think they're called the Pittsburgh Pro now, basic half-inch drive torque wrench. Surprisingly enough, it is Taiwanese made. I think it's kind of funny that they put the word Taiwan actually right on the bolt itself. No other markings on the handle except for foot-pounds on this side and Newton meters on the back side. This is a real basic, just click type torque wrench, swing pawl type ratchet design. These are reversible, so you can torque in both directions. They claim 4% accuracy, and they're relatively okay, I guess, for a $25 torque wrench. And if you can find a return one on the budget shelf, they can be real cheap, like $15 to $18. That's where I found this one. When you adjust it, you have this little lock knob, and it's a low quality torque wrench, so when you adjust it, I find that you can't just put the marking right on the line. Can't even see. The markings aren't particularly deep, but the little lock knob won't go all the way in unless you're kind of like halfway in between the numbers, and then the lock knob goes all the way in, so that's a little bit annoying. We just turned it up to 20 foot-pounds. And I guess its accuracy is relatively okay. If we use this split beam torque wrench, it clicks. It seems to be about 3 or 4 foot-pounds high. And maybe because it just needs some, the pin pulled out and needs some lubrication. But for a cheap, and actually surprisingly enough, Taiwanese torque wrench, for a lot of people who rarely do torque stuff, but just do it for maybe when they're they want to rotate their own tires, that type of thing. That's what this is really optimal for. And because it's cheap enough, you're not so worried about getting it dinged up, lost. If you loan it to a neighbor and they're not super kind to it, at least it's not like some high-grade torque wrench. And the whole reason a lot of these type of products exist is just because a lot of people just can't justify something. Now, I would recommend, for not much more money, like on eBay, you can get much better name brand deflecting beam torque wrenches, which are going to be really accurate. They don't ever need calibration unless you bend them. And they're really simple and lightweight. But the caveat to deflecting beam torque wrenches is even on half-inch ones, most only go to 100 foot-pounds, which really isn't sufficient. It's sufficient for small car lug nuts, but not for like truck lug nuts or large SUVs. And I do recognize that fact. Click type ones tend to be, more user friendly, just because you torque and then it does do the little breakaway, the click action. But a lot of people, the accuracy, I will admit, is a little bit relative, because with deflecting beams are kind of nice because as you're torquing, you're watching the needle go up, and so you bring up the torque right until the needle hits its mark, and then you release, and you tend to actually apply torque more accurately with one of these because you're watching it slowly climb up. The one thing that people don't talk about a lot in click type torque wrench reviews is when you're torquing, you just you assume the click, or you're waiting for the click, so you just put a bunch of force and then it clicks. The thing is you have to go real slow and be real careful, because what happens is the head will click. If I can even... Wow, did I turn that down? I did. Kind of hard to do even with... But you wait for the click, and you've actually pulled a little bit too much. Really, you have to pull just until it breaks and then release. But most people, they pull and then it clicks. Well, when it clicks, the handle bumps over a little bit, and you've actually already over-torqued more than the 3 or 4 foot-pounds of inaccuracy of even a torque wrench like this. And so it's one of the things is most times with click types, people are over-torquing. Kind of like the screws on this. Wow, these are really torqued. Holy mackerel. Get some force on there. Those screws were like put in with an impact driver or something. We'll see if there's some Loctite on them. Zoom in here so we can see the inside. But man, these bad boys were super duper tight. No Loctite. They just put them in with an impact driver or something. My goodness. Probably the tightest screws I've ever run into on a Harbor Freight ratchet. I mean, and that damage to the screw, as we can see, it's actually in the clockwise direction. So they really did just over torque the tar out of these when they built it for some reason. No lubrication in there whatsoever. This is a very old ratchet design, just a simple 36 tooth swing paw. Just a super basic design. And I take that back, there is actually a hint of oil in there. So anyway, there's my little video of the Harbor Freight. I think they're called the Pittsburgh Pro now. In this case, 1/2 inch drive torque wrench. And really, for how cheap it is, you know, for a lot of people, it's going to work, like I said, for just doing basic stuff like torquing lug nuts, suspension bolts, and that type of stuff. I think, you know, for people who are really who don't have very much money, or who just hardly ever, you know, use tools. Not everybody is a mechanic, but just wants to have a torque wrench to do a little bit better job the few times they do some mechanical work. I think these budget torque wrenches are reasonably okay. Now this, and I should mention once again, it does come in a basic case, you know, with a couple of basic calibration card and book. I believe these only have maybe a 90-day warranty. It's possibly a 1 year, so it's kind of a deal that you make sure you get a good one, test it out when you get it, and then just follow the proper procedures where you, since it's a spring known as a micrometer type, that when you're done torquing, you don't leave the tension all the way up, because that causes the spring to kind of get crushed if you let it sit for days and weeks and months on end. So you have to turn it back down to its lowest setting, in this case 10 foot-pounds, before you put it away, so that spring isn't always sitting there in its compressed state. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing, and if you haven't subscribed, please do. Till next time, Catus Maximus out.